Previously on Popping Collars.
And it's by Justin Cronin. So the first book is The Passage, the second is The 12, and the third is City of Mirrors. I know I got Greg into it. Greg, how you doing with The Passage?
I kind of abandoned it.
Stop it, Greg! Stop.
Man.
Greg!
I couldn't put down The Passage. I ate it up, yeah. I never read the second one, though.
Come on.
I'll pick it up again. I haven't forgiven it for killing off the characters, though. Like,
you're useless. Liz, 12, you're gonna love it.
surprise you. Welcome to Popping Collars, the podcast that lives at the intersection between religion and pop culture. I'm your host. My name is Greg Knight. I am in Palm Beach, Florida. With me is my co-host, Liz Easton from Omaha, Nebraska. Hello, Liz.
Hey, Greg.
And we have two special guests this time. From Los Angeles, California, we have Ryan Parker. Welcome back to the show, Ryan.
Thanks very much. Hi.
And from Greensboro, North Carolina, first-time Popping Collars guest, Kevin Matthews. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
If you are a regular listener to this show, then you know that this is the part where I tell you our ridiculously low ranking on the iTunes spirituality chart. However, iTunes has recently changed how they list shows in their categories, and as a result, I no longer know what our ranking is. So,
no!
I'm just going to make one up. This is episode 45 of the number one ranked podcast. Featuring a canon to the ordinary from the state of Nebraska. And our topic today is the documentary film GLEASON. At the age of 34, ex-NFL football player Steve GLEASON was diagnosed with ALS, commonly referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease. So shortly after receiving his diagnosis, he and his wife Michelle learned that they were expecting a child. So this movie kind of compiles video messages from Steve to his son, and he tries to communicate who he is. And that's where I think our conversation kind of begins. Who was the Steve GLEASON that stood out to you? Was it Steve the father? Was it Steve the son? Steve the husband? The football player? The charity organizer? And what was it about that role that kind of stood out to you? Ryan, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks. I think for me, as a Saints fan, a lifelong Saints fan, the person, Steve the football player, always sticks out. I mean, I remember where I was, the blocked punt for the touchdown. I cried in my apartment in Alameda, California, by myself. I think my wife was there. But it was a special, special moment in my life as a fan and as a football fan, as a Saints fan. And then to watch this documentary, which I had, like many Saints fans, had kind of tracked Steve's life and his career post-football. To see him as the humanitarian has kind of come up alongside that as the football player. I mean, Steve the father is great, but that's a relationship. I'm not a father, but I remember walking away from the film the first time I saw it and said, this is what it means to be a father. That kind of love, that kind of eternal love that's going to carry on long after Steve's gone.
Yeah, and I mean, that football moment can't be overstated because, I mean, New Orleans was so close. The Saints were so close to leaving New Orleans.
Don't bring it up.
Following Katrina. I know. Following Katrina, that place was devastated.
Yeah.
And this was the first game back in the Superdome. This was the moment where New Orleans was claiming their spot, and that was the first big play of the New Orleans Saints back in the Superdome after a year away from the city. And so
no sane writer would have written that storyline.
What about you, Kevin? Was there a certain Steve that stood out to you?
I'm going to have to say two because I think they're the same Steve, and that is not just Steve the father, but also Steve the son, because I think one created the other directly. Steve's relationship with his father for much of his life was not very good. Even during the movie, it is a bit tumultuous, mostly over their positions about religion. We learned that his father was not around for large parts of his life and was not particularly a good father. He is determined that he is not going to be what his father was in his life, in his son's life. Even if he dies, he's still going to be more in his son's life than his father was. So I think you can't separate those two. from each other, really.
We talked a little bit about family systems a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about death, of all things, actually, and how sort of family roles come up in funerals and stuff like that. Yeah, it's amazing how much of your life is affected by what it is that you reject from your parents, you know?
Sometimes you accept things from your parents, too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that kind of, I don't know, like, we try to instill things in our kids, and it's sometimes what makes them interesting is, I think, what they reject from us, you know, as parents. I don't know.
You know, Steve says something to the effect of, like, is God for you this father figure, like this white-haired father figure? And the film really gets at the way we conceive of religious figures or gods really depends on the family that we grow up in. For Steve, it wasn't a father. He couldn't picture this divine father figure because his had been so complex, and his father admits failed as a father in many ways.
Yeah. I didn't get a chance to watch the documentary. I was just out of town too much this week. But I really, really want to see it now. So what I did instead was just sort of research Steve Gleason, who I really didn't know of at all before now, and watched every YouTube clip that I possibly could, both surrounding this documentary and about his foundation and about ALS, and was really, really moved. And I feel like the person that I was drawn to the most throughout all of that was, it was sort of the spiritual side of him, I guess, that came out. And maybe that's no surprise, you know, myself being a spiritual person. But I was really moved by the way that he engages with the world, the way, you know, he's from the Pacific Northwest, which I'm from also. So he's reflected quite a bit about the way that the natural world in that part of America resonates with him, and what all of that means to him. There's sort of like a poetry, I think, to his spirit and to his soul that he identifies with. He's a world traveler, seems to be pretty close to the surface emotionally, and I was just really, really moved. And I'll have to say, and this, you know, some people could maybe take offense at this, but as a person who's not a really big sports fan, I was surprised and moved by kind of like a jock who had that real sensitive spiritual side. That was really touching.
Liz, that's a interesting takeaway from your investigation into him, because his own wife admits that she shared similar feelings when they first met. She said, he's a long-haired football player. I thought he was going to be a total cheeseball. Yeah. But he turns out to be this very complex person that has kind of a lot under the surface.
So I am a parent, unlike Ryan. I have two daughters, so there is something about that relationship between him and Rivers. But when they're that young, when they're 1-2 years old, it's so hard. Like, you're more in love with the idea of who your child will be at some point than kind of what your child is as they're developing. And, you know, you kind of got the sense of that from a lot of those videos of him kind of imagining his child watching this and understanding it and listening to the words that he was saying and stuff. Something that wouldn't happen for probably many years from when he was doing that. But for me, what stood out was his relationship with Michelle and what it takes to really communicate with another human being that you're going to spend your life with. This illness takes over shortly after their marriage, shortly after they're starting their life together. And to go into a relationship with the expectations that you have of any relationship, you know, it's going to be like this for the next 50 years and we're going to love each other and blah, 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 to then really put that to the test, like right away, of are you really going to take care of me when I need an enema, you know, on the toilet, or when I need, you know, someone to set my child on my lap because I can't ask, you know, for myself and stuff like that. I just thought that was amazing how you ask so much of that relationship.
Well, and are you going to stick by me when I'm going to die on you? You know,
yeah. Gosh, that's got to be so scary. I mean, that's got to be terrifying.
I just felt like we took a jump off a cliff there. You know, Kevin, that's a great question, because I walked away thinking, how do I answer that? Being married 11 years, am I still prepared to take that leap? And then also to re-examine my own life and say, am I giving enough to the person that I've said I want to be with? Am I being the best person that I can be for that person?
They make a point early on in the film of establishing Michelle as a character, as sort of a free spirit, a wanderer, an adventurer like Steve. You know, she has this great line that comes near the end of the movie that really stuck with me, where she said, "I don't want to be a saint." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. God, that's a gorgeous line, because it just has so much humanity in it. And I think that that's the thing that really comes across in this documentary, is that Michelle is doing her best to care for this person, but she's just a person. She's just a person trying to care for another person with this horrifying disease. I'm terrified of this idea that my body's going to do stuff that I don't want it to do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that whenever I see stories like this, it makes me afraid more than anything else, because it feels like I don't have as much control as I thought I did over what happens.
Well, that's an illusion that we have much control at all.
I have that same reaction, Greg. I feel like, I really don't want that to be my future. But at some point, that's going to be my future, right?
Right, like to one degree or another. Absolutely.
To one degree. I mean, since the last time I was on your podcast, I think my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And now every time I feel a tweak or something that feels off kilter, I'm like, oh man, I hope I'm not really, really sick. Or I think about things about my body in ways I didn't before.
Yeah, and we glorify our bodies to an extent. And I think that, like, I went to a conference recently that was just like, I don't even know if it was a conference. It was a gathering of clergy. And we were talking about healthy and unhealthy habits. And for the first time ever, excessive exercising was mentioned in the same breath as, like, alcohol addiction and other ways of, kind of placating ourselves or numbing ourselves. And it was really interesting because I realized that for a lot of us, not for me, this is not my problem, really excessive exercising and being like in the top physical shape and all the rest creates that illusion of control that I think you were talking about, Greg, because if somehow we are able to be these exceptional physical specimens, then that means something. There's some sort of value placed on that. And most of us would never say it, that there is a lesser value placed on people who don't have that kind of physical health, or those, it's not even, in some cases with disability, it's not a matter of health at all. It's just different bodies.
How much of that is based in scripture? Because it's like, there is this kind of like, there is a normal body kind of portrayed in scripture, and sort of Jesus's healing ministries kind of reset all of the broken bodies back to this normal line throughout, whether that's a dead body or whether it's leprosy or whether it's, whatever. All of these things are reset to what it is that we think of as a normal, healthy human body. What do you think, Kevin? You're a priest.
Thanks. Actually, what immediately came to mind for me was not all the healings, which you're right, there certainly seemed to reset a sense of what normal is. But what came to mind for me was Paul's talking about his impediment that he never identifies for us. Whatever that is, in some way, he reminds us that these bodies are not perfect bodies, and that resurrection brings about that kind of perfection, not this life. Now, that raises all sorts of questions about what happens, resurrection and bodies and all that, too. But it's I think he's good at least at acknowledging that these bodies are imperfect and that we should just expect that. Remember, not all of the healings are about physical things, more than they represent perfection. And I would distinguish between perfection and wholeness.
I was thinking of the biblical narratives of creation, about each of us being made in God's own image and sort of being named good. I thought of, being formed in our mother's wombs before they knew us, that God called us each by name and numbers the hairs on our heads and all of that really rich biblical language. And for many of us whose bodies are not whatever perfect means. I don't know what it means. For many of us in that situation, that to me gives a whole lot of comfort and clarity about who God is and who we are in relationship to God, that our bodies already are perfect because God created them and God loves us. So for me, the healing narratives in the New Testament have to be about something different than that. They cannot be about our created selves being a mistake in some way and then being restored to perfection. I don't really know where I land on that. You mean like I don't really know how I can intellectually understand that other than I really believe that God doesn't make mistakes with our bodies or ourselves.
Really difficult then to say that to someone like Steve Gleason. That, if this is not a mistake, then what is it? The question he's going to ask.
Right, and see that becomes different. I guess I suppose what's hard about this whole story for me is there's sort of like a disease narrative and there's a disability narrative.
What I think is beautiful about the film is that no one in the film is a saint, right? I mean, Steve will always be a saint, but listen, there's probably footage on the cutting room floor of so many tantrums and tirades, and we see shades of that in the film. But Steve accepts this illness, this challenge in his life with such a level head and this kind of clear-eyed approach that this is what has happened to my body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to call God into this for any reason. And that, to me, that's the interesting point about the scene with the faith healing service.
Yeah.
Where he goes with his dad who really does believe, if you come to this service with me, there's this faith healer, or we practice this ritual that there can be healing. And Steve goes and he submits himself to it, and it's a painful scene to watch. But he's happier if he doesn't go and do that.
Well, I think there's a big part of this movie that is about acceptance, not spending all of its energy on how did this happen, but on the choices one makes when something like this does happen.
Right.
He spends his time not worrying about how did this. I don't think he ever asked how did this happen. He instead spends his time with, all right, this is what I've been given. What do I do with my life? What's important to me? My son is important to me. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he knows he has a father. What's important to me? All those other people out there who have a whole lot less money than I do and a lot less influence than I do, who have ALS and can't get computers to speak for them. What's important to me? My wife. And I'm sorry for some of the things I put her through. And he almost systematically goes back to those things as these are the things that are important to me. This is how I make meaning out of my life. That's one of the things I really admired about him, was that he realizes that he doesn't roll over and play dead. He says, I can make meaning out of this life, and I'm going to.
The way that this disease affects him is over a relatively short period of time, and he seems to kind of roll with it in a way that I don't know that I would be able to do. To sort of process things and be present to them that quickly. And I think a lot about what it means to be light on your feet spiritually, like what it means to not be burdened by a lot of possessions, what it means to think about wealth and materials in a way that keeps you light. And I wonder if there's a spiritual levity that some people are blessed with and cultivate that allows them to sort of roll with the punches better than those of us like me who are like so up in your head all the damn time that like, wait, I can't get to the place where I need the talking machine yet because I haven't like written a book about it yet. Like I haven't, I haven't really thought it all the way through yet. Like he just seems to, and it's a relatively quick period of time that this disease affects him so profoundly.
It really is. I mean, he gets diagnosed. They have the news of Michelle's pregnancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're in the delivery room, and it is fairly severe physical impairment.
That's true.
So we're talking 8 to 9 months, and then from there, Liz, I mean, to your point, it just continues to drop off.
But I think that the moments of this film that stood out to me were the moments where he knew that he was crossing over to another level of his illness. So, like, when he realized that he was probably never going to talk again, and that last kind of conversation that he has with the camera, and it's not that he's sad for himself. He's sad that he can't say anything else to Rivers. Like, that's his ultimate kind of loss in that moment.
I think there are people in this world who don't much need religion.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of them. And the reason they don't much need religion is because they kind of get it. And they get it in some way that those of us who need religion don't. His natural turn is towards the people around him, towards the other, not towards what can I get out of this, or why did this happen to me, or all of those endless questions that we turn on ourselves. And that's a really, that's the kind of place I think a lot of us would like to be.
So I grew up in, that kind of religion, that kind of like, do you know where you're going to go if you die tomorrow kind of stuff, right?
Do you, Greg?
No, I don't.
Do you?
I imagine it'll be like a lot like before I was born, but so it's just like it's the sense of guilt, fear, like all of this stuff that's kind of bound up in it, and he has that just explosive moment with his father where he's like, quit trying to save me. I am saved. Like quit, leave me alone. Like I'm okay. I've got it.
Mm-hmm. I don't need this paradigm that you're living with.
Right. And yet, it's this cycle of like guilt and stuff. And sometimes you just need to say out loud, you know what? Quit trying to put this guilt on me. Whatever it is that you're trying to convince me of or scare me of. Like, I'll be okay.
Is it possible to bring together this question or this comment with Liz's early comment about Steve being equipped to roll with it? Like, whatever comes his way, I've got it, I'm going to tackle it, versus this person who just doesn't need religion, doesn't need a divine explanation for everything that happens to him, fundamentally believes that he maybe like the rest of humanity is okay. I mean, that God loves everybody, that there's this kind of... But I get, Greg, your point that there's much of his approach to life that is a rejection of what he was raised in. Yeah. And I think we all probably have some... You mentioned this earlier. There's something about all of us that we push back, but there's also something that, like, he's kept, or that's kind of been cool with him all along.
I like that idea of I don't need religion. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that there are people that don't need salvation. And I think that what he was saying in his moment to his father, it felt like, was like this idea of salve, right? This idea of sort of this salvation, this healing thing. Like, I feel like Steve was sort of saying, this is my disease. I'm going to roll with my disease. Mm-hmm. And I don't need whatever it is that you're trying to, lather me up with in order to save my soul or my body or whatever. I don't need it. I don't.
Well, salvation for the father was an event, and the salvation for Steve was life.
Mm.
Well, and that's what
sounds like a sermon.
Yeah, sure does.
As we say, that'll preach.
What I'm curious about, though, is, I mean, to say that he doesn't need salvation, does he not? Is it that he doesn't need the salvation that his dad was offering, or that his dad's religious? In my belief, we all need salvation.
Yes.
We all are saved by Jesus. I don't really know how that works. I don't know what it looks like. I know that there's a transformation that happens there, and that transformation is wholeness, and it is, becoming one with the God who created us. The Steve Gleason that I met, sort of doing the research that I did, was pretty inspiring throughout his life. Prior to getting ALS and after, there's something about the way that he encounters the world that tells us about that humility, a worldview where salvation is not about your personal relationship with anything, but is about the whole human condition and an objective universal event. Now, for him, that's not a theological event like it is for me, but it takes humility to grasp that. And it seems to me like it takes real humility for him to be so, nimble, to use a buzzword, as he navigates this new normal in his life.
Well, there's something to be said for that point about how not taking that personal approach to salvation is a fuel for ongoing work in the world, which Steve seems to be a model of.
Yes. So thank you for that, because to me it's very clear that he brings that attitude and that grace to the disease, not that it comes out because of the disease.
Exactly.
He walks in with it.
So I'll just go as you are on my screen. So Ryan, where are you? What are you doing? How can people find you on the World Wide Web?
Let's see. I'm based in Los Angeles. I work in film marketing, and I try to write about and podcast about film and TV, largely through poptheology.com. And yeah, that's it. So we're helping promote GLEASON. So it was fun to be on a show like this and talk about a movie that I personally love and hope gets as wide of audience as possible, just because of the inspirational story, and huge Saints fan. So that's a little bit about where I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of play. I've seen it tweeted out by celebrities and stuff recently. So I'm thinking that it's probably going to get a lot of hype, especially as like football season starts ramping up again. Kevin, where are you? What are you doing? How can people find you?
I am in Greensboro, North Carolina. I am the chaplain at St. Mary's House, which is campus ministry to UNCG and Guilford College and Greensboro College, and really any student of higher learning in the city of Greensboro can pretty much stop by, and we'll be happy to see you. Today starts my 11th year at St. Mary's House. You can find us at stmaryshouse.org. That's stmaryshouse.org. Our Instagram is St. Mary's House, the same as except the .org part. And Facebook, me, or St. Mary's House as well.
Liz, where are you? What are you doing? How can people?
I am the canon to the ordinary for the Diocese of Nebraska. I'm in Omaha. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at Liz East, but you cannot find me on Snapchat because do any of you guys Snapchat?
No.
I do Snapchat. I just use the filters with my kids because they like looking like dogs.
Of course. So I was at summer camp last week, I guess, or 2 weeks ago, our diocesan summer camp, which is great fun every year, and sort of got a tutorial in Snapchat and realized that, like, this is that moment where I become the older person who is like, I don't understand your technology. Kids these days. So I sort of want to learn how to do Snapchat. I don't know. Anyway, that's apropos of nothing. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Liz East.
I sort of want to do Snapchat.
Yeah.
The end.
I always figured if I don't have naked pictures of myself to send to anybody, why do I need them to disappear?
Did you guys see?
Just got real.
Just
got real.
No.
The 11th hour, the podcast just went live, y'all.
Speaking of social media and bodies and naked pictures, did you see the story about the Playboy model who Snapchatted the picture from inside the gym locker room?
No.
Oh my God! It's
links in the show notes, everybody.
Yeah, seriously. So she took a photograph of another woman undressing at the gym and intended to send it to just one of her friends on Snapchat, sort of shaming this woman's body, and accidentally made it public.
Oops.
And she's like eviscerated for, appropriately for like violating this woman's privacy. I think it's actually a sex crime, but also for the body shaming element of it. So now everybody across the country is changing in the stalls in their gym locker rooms.
Like they should be.
Okay, so my name's Greg Knight. I am the Director of Children and Youth Ministries at Bethesda by the Sea Episcopal Church in Palm Beach, Florida. You can find us on the web at bbts.org. You can find Popping Collars on Twitter at Popping Collars. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/Popping Collars. You can find us on Instagram, Popping Collars Podcast. Oh, and you can find us on our website, poppingcollarspodcast.com, where you can find all of our archived episodes. Our most recent episodes are available wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher. All we ask is that you subscribe, rate, and review our podcast, and that way we'll move up from the #1 ranked podcast featuring A Canon to the Ordinary to the #1 ranked podcast featuring 4 people talking.
In this very moment, live podcasting, Ryan Parker just followed me on Instagram.
I did.
Right
how about
there.
that?
Guess what, Ryan?
She threw out her handle. I got my phone. I have my phone right here.
Guess what? Follow
Yeah.
back.
Let me tell you something. Making connections. That's what this podcast does.
Hey.
These things happen. They're happening right now. Also, our show is featured on EpiscopalCafe.com each and every time. We love EpiscopalCafe.com. We know you will as well. Check them out for all your Episcopal news needs and beyond. And with that, that is Popping Collars for this time. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Liz, for coming on the show. Keep those collars popped, and we'll see you next time.